And there, they are quite literally digging up the past, because great battles were fought. The first sort of loosening of the Nazi stranglehold on Russia came in the battle at Tver. It was then known as the Kalinin Front, and one of the issues was that any Russian soldier who disappeared, was missing in action, of which there were hundreds of thousands in the war, was deemed to have gone over to the other side. So he was a traitor, and his family was a family of traitors.
Ouch.
So somebody dies sacrificing his life, throwing a grenade at a tank. Tank rolls over him. He's unidentifiable after days of fighting. He is then the enemy, although he died heroically, and the family suffers for generations because they are tainted with this accusation, with this assumption that he was a traitor. And so there are two kinds of diggers there in Tver. One is the red diggers. They dig up the remains of the dead, battle dead, and reunite them with their families, and removing that taint, that black cloud. So it's a pretty it's dangerous work, because you're dealing with old weapons, old rounds of ammunition, old shells, old Molotov cocktails. So that's one group who are very altruistic. And then there's another group called the black diggers, and they're after helmets, belt buckles,
souvenirs,
war souvenirs to sell on eBay. So you've got these it's almost like seeing, this good and evil separate so cleanly in this kind of situation. But this landscape being dug up and history being dug up is pretty arresting.
It is. Do you familiar? I don't know whether it's. I'm going to introduce another author here for a minute, because it's a book I so much admire. David Robbins wrote a book about the siege of Stalingrad called War of the Rats, which I think is one of the most hair-raising books I have truly ever read, in which he has a German and a Russian sniper pitted against each other, but he deals with some of these. I mean, it's a very devastating. He also wrote a devastating book, I think it was David, but maybe somebody else, about the in the 1600s, the 30 Years' War, which was a totally brutal, just as brutal war in not quite that same area. But, Central Europe has had some truly horrendous conflicts.
And we tend to forget about them until something like Serbia and Kosovo, and certainly erupt. And where did that come from? Well, we live in this thin tissue that we call the present, and underneath are all these forces, which are the past.
It's kind of interesting, given the volume of work that you have produced. There are really only 6 Arkady Renko novels, and yet the weight of them really dominates what you've done.
Well, it does, because when you follow one character, but I for December 6th, which was set in pre-war Tokyo, like the day before December 7, Pearl Harbor, it's a great relief. I think Arkady says, "Thanks, please go do something else for a while.
Give me a rest."
give me a rest. So I love taking a character like Harry Niles, who's the protagonist of the Japanese book, and because he's so much nastier and more devious than Arkady's.
And of course, when you write a standalone, nobody has to survive. There's a lot of freedom in writing a book that is not part of a series, isn't there?
But you have to be careful when you're writing a series. You can't kill off too many women.
Right.
You can't kill off too many partners.
Okay.
Because people notice.
Yeah.
And they say, why do Arkady's girlfriends always end up at the bottom of the elevator shaft?
But
none of them actually do, but they're people, because especially if the character has been in a couple of books, people become invested.
Sure, it's kind of a soap opera cast as you move forward.
Oh, I hope not.
Ensemble cast. Let me put it more delicately. How's that?
My repertory company.
But Arkady himself has to survive unless you decide to make it the last Arkady book. So that little bit of fear
yeah.
that the reader might have is dissipated, whereas if you write a standalone book, you
Yes.
could blow away the entire cast.
Well, yeah, you can blow away the time. Well, I feel I kill off enough. I feel I meet my quota.
Tell me about Rose.
Well, Rose was very much a standalone book because I was shopping with my kids, whether they were shopping, and I was pacing the street. And it was a Laura Ashley store.
Aha, lots of flower
Not a lot of
fabric.
stuff in there for a guy.
Right.
Not even a sports magazine. And so I picked up a copy of a book on Victorian apparel.
That would work at Laura Ashley, definitely.
And I'm flipping through the buttons and the bonnets and the gloves and an incredible array of clothing a Victorian woman of any means put on.
Right.
It was practically Japanese.
That's why they had to have dressers. People,
Yes.
no, seriously, you couldn't get in and out of the clothes without help.
And our staff, I just pull that course a little more. And then, way in the back, about page 150, they had the dress of the working class. I thought that was kind of interesting, like 4 pages of the dress of, that there was the working class, which constituted 75% of the population.
Right.
And they had a little picture in there of a couple of young women, healthy young women, holding shovel and a basket. And they had a roll of fabric here that the caption said was their long skirts rolled up and stitched so they couldn't fall, which revealed that the fact that they wore trousers and clogs. But it was the trousers that upset Victorian morality, because they had desexed themselves, and they were investigated 3 times by Parliament for sort of sexual subversion or decency. Men came up in trains from London to see these practically native feral women, and the women and the miners are all covered in black soot, and all you can see of them are their eyes and their lips. And it was just so striking an image. I thought, well, somebody's going to write a book about this. Not me, because I have no interest in the Victorian era. But 2 years later, I just found myself in Wigan, this mining town in the north.
Is this a coal area, Wigan?
Yeah, and a famous coal area. Remember the George Orwell's book, The Road to Wigan Pier.
Oh, right. I've been to Wigan. I was just trying to
You've been to Wigan?
I have been to Wigan.
You're a rare individual.
I have been to the potteries. I have been all over the Midlands. I'm fascinated with it. I mean, England is where the Industrial Revolution really, if you look at the way it changed from an agrarian society in the 18th century and moved into that early industrial, and now they've got a lot of, they've preserved a lot of it,
Yes.
the Sheffield for steel, all that stuff, and I find it completely fascinating.
Well, I do, and the people are terrific. And of course, if they regarded me as if like that poor fellow, look at this American who's come here to write a book about the pit brow lasses, and they thought I was sort of benignly lunatic, but not a danger.
They probably thought you were Barbara Taylor Bradford in drag.
Well, I hope not.
Course, I mean,
I don't know. Well, the next book expo we'll find out.
Well, probably not. But there are things the English call agasagas.
Yes.
In which very often there is a working class girl from Victorian times who's from a mining or manufacturing area.
Yeah.
And in some fashion.
The romantic template.
Right.
The romantic novel, The Bodice Ripper.
Well, it's not really a bodice ripper. It's really about, poor girl from lower class manages to make good, whether it's...
governess?
No, very often she ends up starting her own business. In fact, the Barbara Taylor Bradford book that made her, the first one, the name of which has gone right out of my aging head, was very much about that, a girl from a Wigan sort of background and all, who ended up more or less creating Harrods, a version thereof, because even the British were not going to accept marriage into the upper classes. It was rare that you could overcome